What would you do for adventure on your summer vacation? I met a very mature 14-year-old high school student named Alina Scott. She flew solo over 1,000 miles from South Carolina to Oshkosh, Wisconsin in a single-seat ultralight aircraft to participate in the largest air show in the world, AirVenture Oshkosh.
So stay tuned to experience this young lady's incredible adventure.
Hi, my name is Alina Scott, and I flew from South Carolina to Wisconsin for Oshkosh this year. I flew in an Ultralight 103, and it took me 6 days in total, and then the rest of the days were just moseying around in hotels. In total, I did about 41 hops from airport to airport, and that's where my dad met me to fuel me up each time. Typically I would do 10 to 8 flights a day, except there was one day where we did 2 because of bad weather. But we were lucky enough to have very good weather while we were flying up here. My dad was the pit stop crew. He would have all the fuel, the food, the breakfast, because we would normally wake up at crack of dawn before the sun had even come up yet. So we would be out there with headlights. I would be walking around like a zombie because I was barely awake, and then I would get flying, and then that sleepiness would go away immediately. On my trip, I saw many different views, especially the sun rising, the sun setting. I saw a lot of clouds, mountains. There's a lot of scenery in it, but then there was also a lot of other weather things like turbulence that I had to fight, and being not very experienced when I started, turbulence was something that was a little bit nerve-wracking to deal with. But as I kept flying, turbulence wasn't something that really bothered me anymore. But there was one point during my training where I would just do hops back and forth down the runway to get better at taking off and landing. Overall, the trip was very exciting. It was interesting, and there was a lot of memories that I've gained from it, and different skills that I've learned while flying. I've also gained a sense of independence when I'm flying because I'm the only one who is up there, and no one can really tell me what to do. I remember one time my dad told me, "You could go ahead and fly all the way to Myrtle Beach," and I couldn't do anything because you're the one in command. And that's one of the things that kind of made me realize, I'm on my own now. Because all he could do is drive after me and just worry that everything's okay or something's gone wrong. There wasn't much he could do from the ground. While I was flying and through this trip, I realized that I kind of gained some sense of independence, because there was many different skills that I had to learn on my own, like different techniques when landing, what was right with the airplane, and what sounded wrong, because I was the pilot in command. Aside from all the journey and the fun stuff that I learn, or independence and skills that I gain from this, overall the airplane is just a fun thing to fly by itself. As soon as I started flying it, I got hooked on it, and I just wanted to keep flying and flying. And that's what made my flight from South Carolina to Wisconsin a more interesting one. I had more patience than I thought I would, because I got to see all the scenery, the sun setting, the sun rising, clouds, mountains. But overall, this journey has been something that will help me with the rest of my flight career, and it'll be something that helps me when I have to fly on my own and without a pit stop crew that's following me behind.
My name is William Scott. My daughter, Alina, flew from South Carolina to Oshkosh this year. We started the process of just taxiing around in the Aerolite, sitting in there, making sure she's comfortable. We talked about RPMs, we talked about aerodynamics. Every once in a while I would fly with her in my Cessna 150 to talk about slow flight and talk about spins. We alternated with the taxiing tests, taxiing practice in the Aerolite with other lessons about flying. The steps after you start taxiing, it's a transition into the wheelie, where you're holding back on the controls. You're holding back full elevator in the up position until the nose wheel gets light. Then what we do is I position the Aerolite in the attitude that is I call it the climbing attitude. And I have her sit in it when she's there. And I took a zip tie on this here, and I positioned that zip tie. That would be her target attitude for when she's getting in a wheelie. She wanted to target that zip tie on the horizon. Once the wheel started coming up in the air, the rudder pedals still controlled the left-right direction of the airplane, but now it was actually controlling it aerodynamically, not through a wheel. So she was simultaneously learning how to use the rudder and the elevator at the same time. Her goal, since it was not just full back, because that would eventually just hit the tail wheel on the ground, it was trying to target that zip tie for the horizon so that she got comfortable with that. And we kept on adding a couple hundred RPMs or 100 RPMs to the scenario. We didn't talk about airspeed at all at this point. It was just about engine power. Alina was very disciplined and listened to everything I said. And so when she actually started getting airborne, she just started climbing. She got into a ground effect. And she started using this little tugging technique to try to get the airplane airborne. And that helped her with the control. So she was able to get up and the airplane would naturally come down. So we kept on adding RPMs, and now she had the good sense to, I probably just told her also, nose down, push to go into sort of a cruise flight in the middle. So she started making longer and longer hops. Nice. And as an aside, all of these hops were in dead calm weather. It was crack of dawn. She got better and better at flying at low altitudes, and she was able to fly hundreds of feet, at 2 or 3 feet off the ground. Then I could tell that she started to correct. She started to correct with the rudders and started to correct with the ailerons, things that I didn't tell her, but she just started naturally doing, So she was figuring out a lot of interesting things along the way. She was now starting to modulate the throttle based upon what she says. I feel like I'm losing lift, so she will nose down a little bit. She says I'm too high, so I'll pull back the throttle a little bit. So back and forth and back and forth. She was starting to get the higher than the buildings nearby. She was probably 35 feet in the air. We had a 2,400 foot strip, so you can imagine any airplane flying 35 feet in the air and managing to land on the other end of a 2,400 strip. That's getting pretty adventurous, and she was handling it just fine. And so the next step was to keep going. Was to get out of the pattern and keep going. So back into the Cessna 150 we went, and we talked about, like, when you get out of the pattern, here's where you're going to be. We talked about this island over there. That's a good place. What happens if your engine quits? So we got up in the Cessna 150 and flew around over the inland water area and talked about different, like, what ifs and what if and what if. And she got a little nervous, like, do you think the engine is going to quit? I said, no, but I don't want to just start this conversation if the engine quits. We need to know, you need to have at least a battle plan. And we talked about sort of this range that you can expect, this angle. Even if there's the best landing spot that's beyond your gliding range, don't even think it exists, because it's not, you can't land there. You can't will yourself to land there. One day she just took off, and actually the neighbors had been listening, and they all ran out because they were like, whoa, she didn't stop, you know, because they had got used to her going back and forth and back and forth. So they all rushed out to the end of the runway, and I'm running out there, you know, sweat coming out because I'm nervous, you know, that this is the first time. And I ran out on a dock that we have that took me out over the mud, and I'm looking at her, and there she is. She's twirling around at, you know, 1,500 feet or something like that. And now she just started practicing turns and, you know, 180s and 360s and, you know, just basic flight control stuff that she had learned a little bit of that in the Cessna 150, but you know, this is a different airplane, and so she had to figure out how this one felt. We then started. I talked to her about an HSI, horizontal situation indicator, which the Garmin 196 has a little HSI in it. It also has a moving map, but it has an HSI. I said you could navigate either which way you wanted to, but she actually liked the HSI better. So when she would fly up there, I would say, okay, type in MYR, you know, which is Myrtle Beach, and it's northeast of us a little bit. And she would circle around for a little bit, and when she had figured out where to go, she would start flying in the northeast. I said, here you go, there you go. Type in EYW. And she would circle around, and she starts pointing. I said, how long is it going to take you to get to Key West? She says, well, it says 13 and 40. What does that mean? I said, that means 13 hours, you know. You think you can make it? She says, no, you know. So we started adding in the idea of like looking at her instruments and looking at her gauges and saying, does this make any sense? She knows she only has about an hour, maybe maximum of 2 hours of endurance. So what is she gonna, you know, when she was pointing to her MYR, she says, oh, I could make it there. Key West, no. We tried Oshkosh even. She said it was 17 hours, you know, straight light. We're working on an air-to-air refueling strategy for next year, but I'm just joking. But then we went and when she would rather been chit-chatting with her friends online, I said, no, you got to sit down, and I showed her the flight plan that I'd come up with, going sort of east, north of Atlanta, east of Chattanooga, and then up through Kentucky, Illinois, and into Wisconsin. And then we did a piece where we just flew to Mount Pleasant, you know, which is 4 miles from our house. So we flew to Mount Pleasant, she lands there, and there's like a twin a Navajo or something like that in a jet prop, and you know, like a Piper Meridian jet prop thing, whatever that is. And she's right between them, getting back on the runway. You know, she's behind the jet prop, and she says, I said, don't worry about it, it'll be fine. Just wait a little time after that jet prop is left, because it might be a little bumpy. So she left and flew back to our home grass strip, and that was sort of our trial, the trial balloon for our cross country abilities. Right, I guess it would be 10 days prior to Oshkosh starting, right? You know, that morning she took off and she left, and it was quite an adventure, you know, that flight. And so she would take off, and she would invariably beat me there about by 15 to maybe even an hour in some cases. So once I would get there, we would discuss the next airport. I would fill her up with gas, and off to the next airport she'd go. So those morning flights were picturesque, but interesting too. In some of the video I took, I would watch that, and I could see how it was pitch black, and then the sun would rise while she's en route, you know, and that would make it kind of cool. And then when we got to Fond du Lac, up until then it was about kind of the same routine every time. It wasn't terribly different. But Fond du Lac, we were going to go into a towered airport, and she had done that before. So when she left Fond du Lac and flew to Oshkosh, again, I was like, well, this is it. You know, here she's going, and I didn't know what to. I had nothing else to say to her. So unbeknownst to me, that just as she was about 2 miles outside of Oshkosh, the muffler, a flange on the muffler, breaks off clean. You know, just breaks off, and it starts making all this noise, and she's getting all nervous because, well, I didn't know this till afterwards. That you know, it makes a different sound, and she's like, "Uh-oh, is the thing gonna blow up on me?" She doesn't know what's gonna happen. It was just barely made it to Oshkosh, and when we got here, I had talked to Tim Bogenhagen prior to her getting here, so all the Oshkosh volunteers sort of gathered her up and wished her welcomed her here and so forth. But I think she was in a bit of shock, you know, when she got here, because she had just experienced this strange sound in the motor and she didn't know what was going on, and they towed her up to here. But then, thanks to these guys at Project First Flight, they within like hours they picked up my muffler and welded it. You know, welded it, fixed it, and so now it's back in action. And well, that brings us to now, I guess, where she's flew a little bit yesterday, but you know, she's flown enough now here at Oshkosh that my nerves are settling down a little bit, and you know, she's got it. So I guess that's it.
Seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain. Some things are not the same as they were a year ago, but all will be okay. I move on each and every day. The past is where it stays, way back a year ago. I've changed for the better this time. I thought I would never be fine. I strive just to say I'm alright, and for the first time in a long time I'm alright. I've seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain. Some things are not the same as they were a year ago, but all will be okay. I move on each and every day. The past is where it stays, way back a year ago. calling. I'll keep my head up high through the downs and lows, and we're all going live. Still nobody knows, but I'ma choose what's right and take what comes and goes. And ain't no one in life holding me back no more. I've seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain. Some things are not the same as they were a year ago, but all will be okay. I move on each and every day. The past is where it stays. Way back a year ago.
Hey, tell me again why you like this end of the field, or maybe not, or the other end of the field. Which one do you like the best?
Well, I like that end of the field more because I have more space, and also the spotters and the launchers are more, they have the same view.
Okay.
And normally when I'm coming in, when I see the launchers,
Yes.
and they're not waving a paddle at me to stop, then I know, like, it's okay to land.
Sure.
You know, accept it.
Thank you.
Now you'll also notice.
If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't, and as always, I appreciate your comments. A special thanks to Alina and William Scott for sharing their story. Until next time, take care.